In the summer of 1846, two sisters were sold together, same face, same name on the bill of sale. Leah and Lila. They had shared everything since birth: hunger, bruises, breath. The master who bought them saw their likeness as a blessing, a novelty for his table and his bed. At first, they took turns. One spoke, one stayed silent. It was how they survived. But love and cruelty share the same walls on a plantation, and before the harvest ended, silence turned to envy, and envy to something worse. By the time the cane was cut, one twin had learned that even the bond of blood could sour in the master's house. Before we open the doors of Magnoliahurst, before we step into the room where two sisters learned what it costs to share too much, subscribe to the Macabre Record. Turn on the bell so you never miss another story history tried to silence. And tell me in the comments, if you had nothing left but your blood, would you share even that? Now, let's go back to Louisiana, 1846. The summer heat clung to the girls like breath. Even before the wagon reached the square, the smell of sweat, horses, and fear sat heavy on their tongues. Leah and Lila were 15, born minutes apart in the same cabin, marked with the same scar above their left brow, a burn from a lamp their mother dropped the night she died. The men who brought them north from Terrebonne Parish said they were lucky to be sold together. "Twins fetch more," one laughed. "Folks like things that match." At the auction block, they were made to stand barefoot on the platform, skirts stiff with dust. The trader turned them toward the crowd, smiling as if he were presenting fine china. "2 for 1, gentlemen," he said. "Same age, same strength, same sweet manners." A miracle of the Lord. Leah squeezed Lila's hand. They always did when the world grew too big. A planter near the front adjusted his hat, eyes gleaming. He was tall, his beard trimmed, his linen suit too white for the dust. He didn't look at their faces, only at the space between them, like he was already measuring how far apart he could pull them. When the bidding ended, the name Magnoliahurst was written beside theirs. The man's name was Asa Calder, though everyone called him Master Calder before he ever opened his mouth. The wagon ride to his plantation was long and silent. The driver said nothing, and neither did Calder. He watched them the whole way, his expression unreadable. Leah stared at her sister's reflection in the glass of the carriage window, two faces, nearly the same, but one trying to smile. Lila always tried to smile. "Do you think he'll keep us together?" Lila whispered. Leah didn't answer. The truth was, nobody kept anything together on a plantation for long. When they reached Magnoliahurst, the sky was thick with cicadas. The house rose out of the cane fields like a ghost too proud to die. Columns leaning, paint peeling, the windows open but unwelcoming. Women stood on the porch, house slaves in neat dresses, their eyes quick and wary. Calder stepped down first. "You'll work inside," he told them, voice smooth as warm oil. "One in the kitchen, one in the house. I'll decide which when I see how you serve." He smiled when he said it, the kind of smile that meant something different than the words. That night, the sisters were given a small cot in the corner of the washroom. They lay close, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the creak of floorboards above them, where the master's boots moved slow and steady down the hall. Lila whispered, "We'll be fine." "As long as we stay together," Leah closed her eyes. She wanted to believe that. But somewhere above them, a door opened, and stayed open. The first week at Magnoliahurst passed like a fever. The house was a maze of rooms that smelled of lye and perfume, of men's smoke and women's silence. Leah was sent to the kitchen where she scrubbed pots until her hands split open. Lila was kept upstairs, polishing mirrors and folding linen under the watchful eye of Miss Beatrice, Calder's wife, pale and brittle as porcelain left too long in the sun. At night, when the house went quiet, Leah waited for her sister's footsteps. They shared a corner behind the washroom stove, a space barely big enough for two. Every night, Lila came back later. Every night, she said less. "What's he have you doing up there?" Leah whispered one evening. Lila hesitated, folding her hands in her lap. "He talks. He says I remind him of someone. His daughter, maybe." I don't know. Leah frowned. You ain't nobody's daughter here. Lila tried to smile, but it broke before it reached her eyes. He says we should be grateful. Says he's keeping us together. The next morning, Beatrice summoned Leah upstairs for the first time. The air in the master's quarters felt wrong, too still, too polished. A silver tray sat on the dresser, 2 glasses, one half empty. Lila stood near the window, hair undone, eyes glassy. Calder was at the mirror, buttoning his cuffs, his voice low and kind in the way that made Leah's stomach turn. You've a fine sister, he said. A quiet girl. Knows her place. Leah kept her eyes down. Yes, sir. He moved closer. Do you? The question hung heavy in the air. Leah didn't answer. She didn't have to. He smiled, again that patient, measured smile, and reached out, his thumb tracing the scar above her brow. 2 faces, he murmured. The Lord must have been showing off. Lila's hand tightened around the window frame. Leah felt her breath catch, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then Beatrice's voice echoed down the hall, sharp as glass. Asa! He turned, his hand falling away. Take your sister back to the kitchen, he said quietly. I'll send for you when I need you. The sisters left together, silent until the door closed behind them. Leah could feel her sister shaking beside her. He's not the same with you, Lila whispered when they reached the stairs. Leah looked at her. And what's he like with you? Lila didn't answer. She only said, Don't make him notice you too much. That night, Leah lay awake long after her sister's breathing slowed. Outside, thunder rolled over the fields. Inside, she heard the master's door open again, and somewhere in the house above them, floorboards creaked, softly, slowly, like a prayer being broken. The next morning came heavy with the smell of rain and soap. Leah worked in silence, her arms deep in a basin of cloudy water, scrubbing the blood from a linen sheet that wasn't theirs. Every stroke left her chest tighter, as though the stains weren't coming from the cloth, but from somewhere inside her. The other women in the kitchen avoided her eyes. No one asked whose sheet it was. No one ever did. By midday, Miss Beatrice appeared in the doorway, her perfume fighting the sour air. Where's the quiet one? She asked. Her voice was flat, like a blade that had been sharpened too often. Upstairs, ma'am, Leah said, keeping her eyes on the basin. Beatrice stepped closer. She's got a gift for obedience. That's rare. She paused, her gaze tracing Leah's face, then added, You could learn from her. Leah bit her tongue until she tasted iron. Beatrice turned and left, her skirts whispering like wings of something that had forgotten how to fly. That evening, when Lila came down, she didn't eat. She sat near the washroom door, staring at her hands. Leah crouched beside her. What's wrong? Lila didn't look up. He says I'm his good girl. Leah froze. And you believe him? Lila's lip trembled. He's kind when he talks. Gentle. She said it like she was trying to convince herself. He says you wouldn't understand because you're angry. I'm alive, Leah said. That's all I understand. Lila's eyes flashed, sudden and fierce. You think I want this? You think I asked for his hands on me? Leah reached for her, but Lila jerked away. For the first time, the air between them wasn't shared. It was divided. 2 faces of the same coin, turned opposite sides. They didn't speak again that night. Leah lay awake, listening to her sister's breathing grow uneven, shallow, and tired. When she drifted off, the rain outside had stopped. Just before dawn, a soft knock sounded at the washroom door. Leah stirred, half dreaming, thinking it was the wind. But when she opened her eyes, Lila was gone. The cot beside her was empty. Upstairs, footsteps moved, slow, deliberate. She heard the master's door open, and then a sound she couldn't name, something between a cry and a prayer. Leah waited. Minutes stretched into hours. By the time light crept through the cracks in the boards, the house was silent again. When Lila returned, her hair was unbound, her eyes red, her skin pale as milk. She didn't say a word. She just crawled into the cot and turned her face to the wall. Leah whispered her name, but her sister's lips moved before she could hear the answer. And from upstairs, faintly, came the slow, patient sound of a man closing his door. The days began to fold into one another, thin and heavy as damp paper. Lila stopped humming when she worked, stopped smiling at the small things that used to make the heat bearable. Leah could feel her sister shrinking, as if part of her was being used up piece by piece and replaced with silence. In the kitchen, the other women noticed too. Aunt Mavis, who had been at Magnoliahurst longer than anyone, whispered to Leah one afternoon while stirring stew. "When a man like him starts calling a girl good, it don't mean blessed. It means owned." Leah swallowed hard. "How long before he looks at the next?" Mavis's spoon paused. "You best pray he don't notice you at all." That night, Leah tried again to reach her sister. "We could run," she said softly. "Follow the bayou north." "Find a safe place," Lila shook her head. "He'd find us. He says the world's got no room for girls like us. Says we die out there." Leah's voice hardened. "Better to die free than live in his hands." Lila turned to her, eyes glistening in the dim light. "You talk like it's easy. But when he touches me, it's like he's touching both of us." Leah froze. The words cut too close to something she didn't want to name. The next morning, Calder came to the kitchen. It was rare for him to step below the stairs. The room seemed to flinch when he entered. His boots were clean despite the mud outside. He leaned against the doorway, eyes on Leah. "You girl," he said. "Fetch water from the well. I want it before the noon heat." Lila stiffened at the sound of his voice. She dropped her rag, but Leah touched her arm just once and said, "I'll go." Outside, the air shimmered with heat. The well sat behind the smokehouse, its rope frayed, the bucket smelling faintly of iron. Leah pulled it up slowly, the rope biting her palms. When she turned, Calder was standing there, closer than she expected. "I asked your sister to sing for me last night," he said, his tone casual. "She couldn't." "You've a stronger voice." I imagine Leah stared at him, the bucket trembling in her hands. "I don't sing for no one," he smiled. "That's a pity. I like when two things sound the same." Before she could move, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You both have the same scar. I keep forgetting which one I've spoken to." Leah stepped back, her heart pounding. "You best remember, sir. One of us bites." His smile faltered, just for a second. Then he laughed, a quiet, humorless sound, and turned away. When Leah returned to the kitchen, her sister was gone again. And that night, the door upstairs stayed open longer than ever. By the 5th week, Magnoliahurst began to feel like a living thing. It breathed when the wind passed through the broken shutters, groaned in the night as if the beams remembered everything that had happened under its roof. Leah started waking before dawn, not from dreams, but from the sound of the house itself. Slow creaks, the distant thud of a door, the faint weeping of a woman that always stopped when she opened her eyes. Lila was thinner now. Her collarbones pressed against the skin, her eyes had gone glassy, and when she smiled, it was only because someone was watching. Leah saw it, the hollow behind the eyes, the forced grace, the way she tried to pretend her body was her own. One morning, as Leah was scrubbing the floorboards outside the parlour, Calder stepped out of his study. His boots stopped inches from her hands. "You missed a spot," he said, not looking at her, pointing to the dark streak under his shoe. She looked up, the kind of look that could have been defiance if not for the fear underneath it. "It's clean, sir." He crouched, meeting her eyes for the first time. "You're the stubborn one." His hand reached for her chin. "Your sister knows how to keep peace. You could learn from her." Leah kept her voice even. "Peace for who?" Calder's hand froze mid-air. A faint smile, then nothing. He straightened up and walked away, his boots echoing down the hallway. That evening, Lila came to her in the washroom, her breath unsteady, her fingers stained with candle wax. "He says he's going to move me to the big room," she whispered. "He says I'm not to work anymore." Leah stared at her, her voice dry as dust. "And you believe that's kindness?" Lila shook her head slowly. "No, but I don't think it's hate either. Maybe it's just what happens." "What happens?" Leah repeated. "Like the rain or the heat." Lila's eyes filled, and for the first time in weeks she reached for Leah's hand. "I just want it to stop." Leah squeezed back, hard. "Then make it stop." That night, Lila didn't return to the cot. Leah sat awake, counting the hours until the cicadas went quiet, until the moon sank low enough to touch the fields. When she finally crept upstairs, the house was dark except for a line of light under the master's door. She stood there, listening. There was no sound, not even breathing, just the faint scrape of a chair moving across the floor. Leah turned away. She didn't go back to her cot. She went outside instead, into the thick air and the sound of crickets. The cane field shimmered under the moonlight, silver and still, like water waiting to drown something. She whispered her sister's name once, softly, and from the open window above, a shadow moved. Just one. Leah didn't sleep that night. She sat by the smokehouse until the horizon began to pale, the damp air turning cool against her skin. When the rooster crowed, she finally rose and went back to the house. Inside, the walls were too quiet. The air felt wrong, like the house itself was holding its breath. She found her sister in the parlor. Lila was sitting on the settee, barefoot, still in the thin nightdress she'd been given. Her hair hung loose, and her eyes were unfocused, looking at something far away and invisible. Calder sat across from her, in his shirt sleeves, drinking coffee. When he noticed Leah, he didn't seem surprised. "Your sister's been talking," he said mildly, as if it were about the weather. "She said she's ready to be more than she's been. That she understands her place." Lila didn't move. Her hands rested on her knees like they didn't belong to her. Leah stared at her. "What did you say to him?" Calder smiled, slow and patient. "She said she wanted peace. And I told her peace comes from obedience." He stood, poured himself another cup and added, "You could have peace too, Leah, if you stopped fighting what's already decided." Leah stepped closer. "You mean if I became quiet like her?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You always did understand quicker than most." Leah's pulse roared in her ears. She looked at Lila, her twin, her other half, and saw nothing but stillness where warmth used to be. The silence between them was unbearable. That afternoon, the work carried on. The kitchen smelled of cornbread and lard, of things that made other people's lives easy. Leah's hands moved without thought. Her mind stayed upstairs. Every creak in the ceiling made her flinch. By nightfall, Lila still hadn't come down. When Leah brought the washwater to the second floor, she found Beatrice at the end of the hall, standing near the window. The mistress's face looked carved from marble. "You and your sister," she said without turning. "You've brought sin into this house. He says it's your fault, that you make him weak." Leah froze. "We didn't bring nothing he didn't already have." Beatrice turned sharply, her hand flashing out. The slap was quick, controlled, deliberate. "You forget your place," she hissed. "Whatever happens next, you earned it." Leah's cheek burned, but she didn't look away. "If it happens, it's on all of us." For a moment, Beatrice's expression cracked. Then she left, skirts whispering against the floorboards. When Leah reached the master's room later that night, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the candle burned low, shadows trembling on the walls. Lila was lying on the bed, eyes open, her lips moving but no sound coming out. Leah stepped inside. "Lila," she whispered. Her sister blinked once, slow like she was trying to wake from a dream. Then a single tear slipped down her cheek, and beside her, on the nightstand, sat the master's glass, half full, the liquid pale as milk. Leah didn't move at first. The room smelled of sweat, candle wax and something sour underneath, like spoiled milk. The air was thick, humming with the sound of the night insects outside. She could hear her own pulse, heavy and uneven. "Lila," she said again, softer this time. Her sister's lips moved, but only a whisper escaped. "He says..." "We're lucky," Lila murmured, voice cracked and distant. "He says we were made for this." Leah sank to her knees beside the bed. "You don't have to believe him." Lila's eyes shifted toward her, dull and unblinking. "He says we belong to him because we came into the world together. Like one thing. He says breaking us apart would be against God." Leah's throat tightened. She wanted to pull her sister up, to take her away from that bed, that smell, that house. But Lila's body had gone limp, her head lolling to the side like a child's doll. Leah touched her face, and Lila flinched, whispering, Don't make him angry." Something inside Leah snapped, not loud, not sudden, just a quiet breaking, like a seam splitting beneath old fabric. She stood and faced the door. Asa Calder was leaning in the doorway, his shadow long across the floor. His expression wasn't cruel or kind. It was something worse, indifferent. "She's tired," he said. "You can help her bathe if you like." "She trusts you." Leah's hands clenched at her sides. "You've taken everything from her." He tilted his head. "No, I've given her peace. You're the one who keeps her restless." Leah's voice trembled, low but sharp. "You call this peace?" He stepped into the room, so close she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "It's all there ever is," he whispered. "Some fight it. Some learn to live inside it." Leah met his gaze. "And which one am I?" He smiled faintly. "You'll show me soon enough." Then he turned and left, closing the door behind him. Leah waited until his footsteps faded, then sat on the edge of the bed. Lila's breathing came in shallow bursts, her eyes half closed. She looked like she was fading into the sheets themselves. Leah touched her hand gently. "You're not staying here another night." Lila's eyes flickered. "He'll find us. Not if he doesn't know where to look." For the first time in weeks, a spark of something returned to Lila's gaze. Fear, maybe, or hope. Leah didn't care which. She needed her sister to move, to breathe, to remember. Outside, the moon had risen, pale and low over the cane fields. The house creaked softly, the sound of timbers bending, of something old trying to speak. Leah helped her sister sit up. "When the rooster crows," she whispered, "we go." And from the hall came the faint echo of boots, steady, deliberate, moving toward the stairs. Leah didn't breathe until the sound of the boots faded. Even then, she kept her hand pressed over Lila's mouth, feeling the shallow tremor of her sister's breath against her palm. The candle on the nightstand sputtered, throwing weak light across the wall. In that moment, Leah noticed the mark on Lila's neck. Dark, oval, too fresh to fade. When she took her hand away, Lila whispered, "He said I belong upstairs now." Said the world's too cruel for the weaker one. Leah swallowed the bile that rose in her throat. "You're not weak." Lila's eyes darted toward the door, as if the house itself might hear. "Don't say that," she said. "He hears everything." Outside, a dog barked once and then fell silent. The night had gone still, the kind of stillness that feels like waiting. Leah helped her sister stand, but Lila's legs trembled. "We go now," Leah said, her voice low. "Through the fields." Mavis said there's a creek that leads north. Lila hesitated. "If they catch us." "They won't." Leah guided her toward the hall. The floorboards creaked, each step loud enough to make her heart stutter. At the top of the stairs, a lantern flickered near the entryway, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. When they reached the back door, Leah froze. The latch had been bolted from the outside. Her pulse quickened. "No," she whispered, fumbling at the iron lock. "No, no, no." Behind her, Lila's breathing hitched. Then came the voice, soft, steady, and far too calm. "I wondered how long it would take," Calder said. He stood in the parlor doorway, barefoot, shirt sleeves rolled, the lamplight painting him in amber. "Running is foolish, Leah. There's nowhere to go. You can't hide from what you are." Leah turned to face him, her hands trembling. "You mean what you made us." He took a step forward, slow, as if teaching a lesson. "You think there's another world that will take you in. Two mirror-faced girls, runaways, thieves of God's order." "I'll find one," Leah said. "I'll build it if I have to." Lila clung to her arm, shaking her head. "Please, don't make him angry," but Calder wasn't angry. He was smiling, and that terrified Leah more. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. "I wanted you to understand. You were born bound. It's how God wrote your story." Leah stepped in front of Lila. "Then maybe it's time someone rewrote it." Calder's smile faltered. "You sound just like her," the first night she talked back. "What did you do to her?" Leah demanded. His silence was the answer. The candle light quivered. Leah could feel her heartbeat in her throat, wild and cold. Lila's hand slipped from hers. Then, without another word, Leah lunged for the poker by the hearth. Calder's eyes widened, not with fear, but with disbelief. And in that breath of stillness before anyone moved, the house seemed to lean in, listening. The iron poker caught the edge of the firelight as Leah gripped it tight. Her palms slick with sweat, her chest trembling. She didn't even realize she was breathing in shallow gasps until she felt her ribs ache. Calder stood motionless, one hand lifted as though he might still calm her. But something in Leah's face made him step back. "Think carefully," he said, his voice low. "You strike me. You die. She dies too." Lila whimpered behind her, the sound small and broken. Leah's hand trembled, but she didn't lower the poker. "You already killed us," she said. Calder's expression hardened. "Ungrateful," he hissed. "You're alive because I spared you. Do you think anyone else would have bought two of your kind? You're nothing without my house, my name." Leah swung. Not hard enough to break, but enough to silence him. The poker glanced off his shoulder and he staggered. For one breath, she thought she'd done it, that she'd ended it. But then he straightened, his face gone cold and bloodless. "You'll regret that," he whispered. He moved fast. His hand caught her wrist, twisting until pain shot through her arm. She bit her tongue to keep from screaming. He shoved her against the wall, the poker clattering to the floor. "You forget who you are," he said through clenched teeth. "But I'll remind you," Lila cried out, rushing toward them. "Stop, please!" She grabbed at his arm, her voice cracking. "Please, you'll kill her!" He turned, shoving her back. The force sent her into the edge of the table. There was a sound, soft, wrong, and then silence. For a second, no one moved. Then Lila slumped to the floor. Leah froze, her mind refusing to believe what her eyes saw. Her sister's eyes fluttered, lips parting like she wanted to say her name, but no sound came. Calder stepped back, his chest rising and falling. His face had gone pale. "She shouldn't have," he started, but the words didn't finish. Leah dropped to her knees beside her twin. "Lila," she whispered, shaking her gently. "Lila, look at me." Her sister's eyes found hers for one brief, final heartbeat. Then they lost focus. Her body went still. The air left the room. Leah's scream didn't sound human. It tore through her like something breaking in two. Calder reached toward her, maybe to quiet her, maybe to pull her away, but she lunged before he could. Her nails caught his cheek, drawing a red line down to his jaw. He stumbled, cursed, and turned toward the door. Leah knelt beside her sister, cradling her face, whispering the same word over and over until it stopped sounding like language. Outside, thunder rolled. The first drops of rain began to strike the roof, slow and heavy. And in the master's house of Magnoliahurst, two faces, once the same, finally became one again, one still, one burning. The storm came down like judgment. Rain struck the tin roof in angry waves, thunder rolled through the cane fields, and the wind slammed shutters that hadn't been shut in years. Leah sat on the floor beside her sister, her dress soaked with blood and rainwater. The open window let in gusts that made the candle flame bend sideways, shadows crawling across the walls like restless ghosts. She couldn't cry anymore. Her body had gone past it, hollowed out and shaking. Her sister's head rested against her lap, eyes open, unblinking. Leah brushed a strand of hair from Lila's cheek, whispering the only prayer she could remember. God, if you see her, let her not remember this place. Down the hall, footsteps moved, slow, deliberate. Colder again. Leah looked toward the door, her breath caught halfway in her chest. The knob turned, creaking. He stepped inside, his shirt half untucked, his face cut and streaked with blood from her nails. For a long moment, he said nothing. His gaze dropped to Lila's body, then to Leah, and something in his expression twisted. Not grief, fear. She fell, he said quickly, his voice too calm. You saw it. You'll tell them she fell. Leah stared at him. Her hand still rested on her sister's body, her fingers streaked with red. Tell who? He blinked, startled by her tone. The men. When they ask, no one's going to ask, she said softly. Calder took a step closer, and she saw the flicker of panic behind his eyes. You listen to me, girl. You'll keep your mouth shut. You'll keep working. You'll live. Leah rose slowly, her knees trembling. Live, her voice cracked. What part of this is living? He tried to grab her arm again, but she stepped back. The poker lay near the hearth, its iron blackened and steaming from the heat. Her eyes found it. Calder saw the shift in her gaze and hesitated. Don't, he said quietly. You'll hang for it. Leah moved closer. Each step was silent but heavy, deliberate. She's gone because of you, she whispered. You think hanging scares me. He lifted a hand, perhaps to strike, perhaps to plead, but she didn't let him finish. The poker struck his temple with a wet sound, dull and final. He staggered once, twice, and fell against the table. The lamp toppled. Oil spilled across the floor, the flame catching like breath. Leah dropped the poker, staring at the spreading fire. Calder didn't move. She knelt beside her sister again. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice shaking. I couldn't save us both. The flames reached the curtains, then the ceiling. Smoke filled the room, black and choking. Leah pressed one last kiss to Lila's forehead, then stood and turned toward the hall. Behind her the room blazed bright as day, devouring everything it touched. She didn't look back. The hallway filled with smoke before Leah made it to the stairs. She pulled her apron over her mouth, eyes burning, lungs raw. The heat pressed against her skin like open hands. Behind her, the master's room crackled and hissed as the fire consumed it, boards popping like bones. Somewhere in the chaos, the portrait of Beatrice Calder, the mistress in her white gown, caught fire, her painted smile melting into a scream. Leah stumbled down the steps. Her bare feet slipped on the wet wood. The rain was pouring in through the open door, mixing with the soot and ash. The world outside was a storm of noise, wind, thunder, shouts. Figures were moving near the fields, the other slaves awakened by the light and the sound of breaking glass. Fire, someone yelled. Fire in the big house. Leah pushed through the doorway, into the yard, coughing hard. Mavis was there, her head wrapped in a soaked kerchief, eyes wide and wet from rain and smoke. Child, she cried, grabbing Leah's arm, what did you do? Leah could barely form words. He's still inside. Mavis's face went still. Then let him burn. But Leah's gaze shifted toward the upstairs window, the one she knew too well. Behind it, the flames roared higher, white and furious, until the whole frame shuddered and collapsed inward. She thought she saw Lila's face in that fire, for just a second, soft and unafraid, like she was finally warm. Leah fell to her knees in the mud. The sky split open with lightning, illuminating the whole plantation in one merciless flash. The rain turned the dirt red around her hands. Someone shouted her name. Hands pulled her up. Come on, Mavis said, dragging her toward the trees. They'll blame you when the fire's out. You hear me? Ain't no one gonna believe a word you say. Leah stumbled after her. She's gone, she whispered. I left her there. Then you best not join her, Mavis said. They reached the edge of the cane field. The stalks swayed under the storm, tall and whispering. Behind them, the house crackled, its roof caving in, sending sparks into the night like dying stars. Leah turned one last time. The glow of the burning mansion reflected in her eyes. For a moment it looked almost holy, a cleansing, a judgment. "Keep moving," Mavis said, pushing her forward. Leah followed her into the cane, the rain soaking through her clothes until she could no longer tell if what covered her skin was water or blood or both. When the dawn came, Magnolia Hurst was nothing but a black skeleton against a pale sky, and in the ashes, two things were found: a man's body near the hearth, and beside it the faint outline of another smaller shape, as if someone had lain down beside him before the end. By the time the sun rose, the fire had eaten most of Magnolia Hurst. The chimney stood alone in the ruins like a gravestone. The rain had turned the yard into a slick of mud and soot, scattered with blackened furniture, the bones of the house still smoking. No one spoke above a whisper. No one asked questions. Leah stood at the edge of the field, her body trembling with exhaustion, her mind stripped bare. Mavis had led her deep into the cane before dawn, hiding her until the shouting stopped. Now they stood in the pale morning light, watching the smoke curl upward like a prayer that would never reach heaven. "They'll come looking," Mavis said quietly. "When the sun's high, the men'll ride out." "You can't be here when they do." Leah nodded slowly. Her lips were cracked, her eyes raw from smoke. "He's dead," she said, the words tasting strange, like something she wasn't supposed to say out loud. Mavis didn't look at her. "Fire takes what it wants, but don't think it leaves you clean." Leah's voice dropped to a whisper. She was still inside. Mavis turned then, her expression softening. "You couldn't have saved her." Leah shook her head. "She saved me. Always did." They waited until the overseer's shouts carried across the field, the sound of men gathering, the barking of dogs. Then Mavis handed her a small cloth bundle. "Cornbread, some salt. It ain't much, but it'll keep you up the river. Follow the bayou till you see the oaks leaning over the water. There's folks there that help runaways." Leah took it with shaking hands. "And you?" "I've been here too long to start running now," Mavis said, a sad smile touching her lips. "But you still got years left to spend. Don't waste 'em by staying in the ashes." Leah turned toward the woods. Every step away from the house felt heavy, as if invisible hands were trying to drag her back. She could still smell the smoke, still see the flicker of orange behind her eyelids. Halfway through the trees, she stopped. The ground was soft, puddled with rainwater. Her reflection stared up at her from a shallow pool, mud-streaked face, eyes red and hollow. But for a moment, she saw Lila's reflection beside her too. The same face, unburned, peaceful. "Go," Lila's voice seemed to say, though the wind carried no sound. "Keep walking." Leah blinked, and the image was gone. By the time the men reached the ruins, she was miles away, her dress torn, her feet bleeding, the forest closing around her. Behind her, the plantations smouldered, one last breath of heat against the morning cold. And when the ashes settled, the overseer claimed he saw two handprints side by side in the soot near the hearth, small and identical. He swore they were still warm. Leah followed the bayou north for 3 days without rest. The land changed as she walked, the sugar fields giving way to marsh and moss, the air growing heavy with the sweet rot of cypress. The nights were the worst. Every noise, the croak of frogs, the slap of water, sounded like footsteps coming for her. She didn't sleep. She drifted in and out of half-dreams, her sister's voice always close but never clear. By the 4th morning, her feet were swollen and torn, her dress stiff with mud. She found a hollow under a fallen tree and crawled inside, clutching Mavis's bundle to her chest. The cornbread was nearly gone, but she saved the last piece, breaking it in half and leaving one bit beside her. Habit, she supposed, for Lila. When she woke, it was dusk. The sky was copper-coloured, and the air smelled of river and rain. She heard something moving through the brush, slow, careful. She tensed, ready to run. A voice whispered, "You lost, girl." A man stepped into view, tall, dark-skinned, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were worn but clean, his eyes sharp. Leah froze. He raised a hand, palm open. "Ain't here to hurt you. Mavis sent word up the river. Said a twin girl might come through." Leah didn't speak. She didn't trust her throat to work. "My name's Elias," he said. "We get folks across the water. You come with me, you got a chance." She hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You don't even know what I done." He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "Don't matter what you done. Only what you got left to carry." Something in his tone broke the wall she'd built inside herself. She followed. They moved through the swamp by moonlight, the water knee-deep and cold. Spanish moss hung like grey shrouds from the trees, the air buzzed with insects and memory. Once, Leah thought she heard laughter behind her, a soft, familiar sound, but when she turned, it was only wind in the reeds. "You got family?" Elias asked after a while. Leah hesitated. "I did." He nodded. "Then you know what it is to keep somebody alive, even when they're gone." She looked down at her reflection in the water. For a second, two faces stared back, hers and another, smiling faintly. Then a ripple erased it. By dawn, they reached a flat boat hidden among the reeds. Elias handed her a ragged shawl and gestured for her to lie low. The waterway stretched ahead, wide and pale beneath the morning mist. "You cross this," he said, "and you ain't in Louisiana no more." Leah looked out over the endless grey, her body trembling, her sister's name a steady echo in her chest. "I ain't anywhere no more," she whispered. Then she stepped onto the boat, and the river began to carry her away. The river carried Leah through the fog like a cradle and a coffin all at once. The water was calm, the oar strokes slow, silent, measured. Elias didn't speak again for hours. He let the swamp do the talking. Bullfrogs croaked in the distance. Cypress roots rose from the shallows like blackened knuckles. Somewhere behind them, a whippoorwill called, long and mournful. Leah sat wrapped in the shawl, staring into the grey distance. Her reflection trembled across the water, her face thinner now, older somehow. When she blinked, she thought she saw her sister's reflection instead, smiling softly, mouth forming the word, "Go." She turned away from the water. By midday, they reached a bank where the trees grew thick and wild. Elias tied the boat to a root and climbed out first. "We walk from here," he said. "There's a safe place up the ridge, a house that don't ask questions." Leah followed him, her legs shaking from the effort. "What kind of house?" "The kind built by folks who had to run once too," he said. "Freedmen. A few white folks who lost more than they owned. You'll rest there. After that, you decide where you go." They hiked in silence, mud clinging to their feet. The path twisted through the trees until the ground began to rise. Near the top of the ridge, Leah saw a cabin, small, leaning slightly, smoke curling from the chimney. Elias knocked once on the door, 3 slow taps. A woman answered, tall, broad-shouldered, her hair streaked with silver. Her eyes landed on Leah, and for a moment her face softened. "You're the one from downriver," she said. "The one Mavis sent." Leah nodded weakly. "Come in, child. You look like you've been walking through the devil's mouth." Inside, the cabin was dim, but warm. The air smelled of herbs and something cooking slow over the fire. Leah sank onto a stool near the hearth. Her hands shook when she reached for the cup of water the woman offered. "My name's Ruth," the woman said. "You safe here?" Leah swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Safe don't feel like nothing anymore." Ruth nodded. "That's 'cause safe don't erase what happened. It just gives you a place to breathe." Leah stared into the flames. The firelight flickered across her face, reminding her of another fire, one that didn't give warmth. "She's gone," she said finally. "My sister. I left her there." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Sometimes the ones we leave behind don't stay behind. Not in the way we think." Leah looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Ruth gave her a small, tired smile. "You'll see. Grief's a long road, child, and it walks beside you even when you can't see its feet. Outside, the rain began again, slow, steady, unending. And for the first time since the fire, Leah let herself close her eyes. Leah slept for nearly a full day. When she woke, the light through the window had turned soft and gold, dust motes spinning like tiny ghosts in the air. For a long time she didn't know where she was. The sound of the fire crackling made her flinch before she remembered this house wasn't burning. Ruth sat at a small table near the door, shelling beans. Her movements were slow, practiced, steady. "You hungry?" she asked without looking up. Leah nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Ruth ladled something thick and brown from the pot on the fire and handed her a bowl. "Eat slow. Your body remembers starvation long after your stomach forgets," Leah obeyed, spoon trembling in her hand. The stew was warm and simple, but every bite hurt going down, like her body didn't trust food anymore. When she finished, Ruth said quietly, "You want to talk about her?" Leah stared at the fire. "I see her sometimes," she said, "in the water. In my dreams. She's always looking at me like she's waiting for me to say something, but I can't." Ruth nodded. "You will. When you're ready. Some wounds don't close from the outside." The quiet stretched between them. Leah looked down at her hands, the small scars from the poker still faintly visible. "She was the soft one," she said finally. "Always believed people could be kind. I used to hate that about her, thought it made her weak. And now?" Ruth asked. "Now I think it was the strongest thing she had," Leah said, her voice breaking. "And he took it from her." Ruth put down her bowl. "Men like him take everything they touch. They don't stop till something stops them." Leah's eyes met hers. "I stopped him." Ruth studied her for a moment, then said, "Good." Leah blinked. "Good? You think peace comes from mercy," Ruth said. "Sometimes peace comes from ending what hurts you." Leah didn't answer. She just watched the flames, her mind flickering with memories she didn't want to see. Her sister's hand slipping from hers, the smell of smoke, the sound of rain hitting ash. When night fell, Ruth handed her a blanket. "You can stay here a while," she said. "Work if you can. Sleep if you can't." "There's no rush," Leah nodded. "I don't know where else to go." "You don't need to," Ruth said. "The road'll find you when it's time." Later, when Leah lay down on the cot, the wind rattled the windows. In the sound, she thought she heard something else. Soft humming, the same tune her sister used to sing while they worked. Leah's eyes filled, but she didn't move. She just listened. And when the wind fell quiet again, the humming didn't stop. Leah stayed in Ruth's cabin for nearly a week. The days passed like water through a sieve, slow, quiet, leaving no mark except the silence it carried. She helped gather wood, washed clothes by the creek, and swept the floor, though Ruth never asked her to. The rhythm gave her something to hold on to, something that wasn't fire or blood. Sometimes at dusk, Ruth would hum while stirring the pot, low and mournful. It was the same kind of sound Lila used to make when they were little, rocking back and forth beside their mother's bed. Leah didn't ask Ruth where she learned it. She didn't need to. Grief was a language older than words. One morning, Ruth found her sitting by the window, eyes fixed on the woods. "You keep looking back that way," she said softly. "You expecting someone?" Leah shook her head. "No, I just keep thinking she might come walking out of the trees." Ruth sat beside her. "You think death's a door that works both ways?" Leah frowned. "I think she wouldn't leave me if she didn't have to." Ruth sighed. "The dead don't leave us. They just wait where we can't see 'em." That night, Leah couldn't sleep. The moonlight cut through the cracks in the wall, striping her cot with silver. The cabin creaked, the fire popped, and somewhere outside an owl called low. She thought again of Lila, her laugh, her hand, her softness. She wondered if her sister had known what was coming that night, if she'd been afraid, if at the end she'd forgiven her. Leah rose quietly and went outside. The air was cool and damp, heavy with the smell of river moss. She walked to the edge of the trees, bare feet sinking into the soft ground. The moon hung low, reflected in the dark water. She knelt by the creek and whispered, "I'm sorry." The wind stirred, rippling the surface. For just a second she saw it again. Two reflections side by side, her own and Lila's, their faces calm, still, unblinking. Leah didn't flinch this time. She reached toward the water, fingertips grazing the surface. "You can rest now," she said. "I'll carry what's left." The second reflection blinked once and vanished. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open. Ruth's voice drifted out, quiet but certain. "She heard you." Leah turned. "How do you know?" Ruth stepped into the moonlight, her face soft. "Because that's how peace starts, when the living finally talk to the dead." Leah nodded slowly. For the first time, her shoulders eased. She looked at the water one last time, the moonlight trembling across it, then rose and walked back toward the cabin. Not healed, not whole, but no longer haunted by silence. The next morning dawned clear, the first without rain since Leah had arrived. Mist curled over the riverbank, lifting slow as breath, and the forest beyond Ruth's cabin shimmered with dew. The stillness of it was strange, almost holy, but Leah couldn't shake the feeling that silence never lasted long in her life. Ruth found her outside, tending to the small fire pit. "You ever think about where you'll go next?" she asked. Leah shook her head. "I don't know where next is. The world feels bigger now, but smaller too." Ruth smiled faintly. "That's what freedom feels like at first." Too wide to stand in, Leah stirred the ashes with a stick, the grey dust swirling like memory. "If I walk far enough, you think I'll stop seeing her?" Ruth's voice was gentle. "You don't want to stop seeing her. You just want it to stop hurting." Leah nodded. She used to hum when she worked, said it made the time go by faster. "Now I hum, and it feels like I'm stealing her voice." Ruth crouched beside her. "You're keeping her alive, not stealing. When a song leaves one mouth, it finds another. That's how the world remembers what it did to us." The words settled into Leah's bones. She didn't speak again for a long while. Later that day, a man arrived on horseback. Dark coat, tired eyes, the kind of face that looked like it had buried too many names. He spoke quietly with Ruth by the door while Leah watched from inside. She caught fragments of their talk. Patrols, search parties, plantation men asking questions. When Ruth came back in, her expression was grim. "They're looking for a runaway woman. They say she burned the Calder place to the ground. They're heading upriver." Leah froze. Her stomach dropped like a stone. "How close?" 2 days, maybe less." Leah's hands began to shake. "If they find me—" "They won't," Ruth said quickly. "You'll leave before sundown. Elias knows another way north, through the swamps. It's slower, but they'll never follow that path." Leah rose, her breath unsteady. "I can't keep running forever." Ruth took her hands. "You don't have to run forever, just until the world forgets your name." Leah tried to smile, but it didn't hold. "They won't forget. Not down there. Not after what I did." Ruth squeezed her fingers. "Then make them remember something else." Leah looked at her, unsure what she meant. "Live," Ruth said simply. "That's how you change the story." That evening, Leah packed what little she had: the shawl, the bread, the memory of her sister's song. As the sun slipped behind the trees, Elias returned with the small flatboat waiting at the river's edge. Ruth stood in the doorway, watching her go. "You tell the truth when you can," she said softly. "But when you can't, you keep the truth safe." Leah nodded once, then she stepped into the fog. The fog clung to the river like breath, heavy and pale. Leah and Elias moved through it in silence, the small boat cutting across water that looked more like glass than current. The only sounds were the dip of the oar and the quiet rhythm of Leah's own heartbeat, too loud in her chest. By dusk, the fog began to lift. Cypress trees rose around them, their roots twisting up from the water like hands trying to escape the earth. Birds moved in the branches above, startled by the sound of the boat's wake. Elias steered toward a low bank covered in reeds. "We'll rest here," he said. "Too dark to move ahead tonight." Leah nodded. She climbed out, her skirt clinging to her legs, her shoes sinking into the soft mud. They made a small camp. No fire, just a dry patch beneath the trees, and a blanket spread between them. "You can sleep," Elias said quietly. "I'll keep watch." Leah looked at him across the dim light. "You always help strangers like this?" He gave a slow shrug. "Ain't many strangers left in this world. Only people trying to find their way back from something." Leah watched the water shimmer in the last light of evening. "I don't think I'm going back from anything," she said. "I think I'm just walking away." He studied her face. "That's still something." The quiet stretched between them. Somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called again, long, low, echoing over the water. Leah closed her eyes, but her mind didn't rest. Every time she drifted near sleep, she saw her sister's face, not burning, not afraid, just watching her, calm and steady. At some point in the night, she woke to find the fog thicker than before, curling low across the ground. The air smelled faintly of rain and something sweet, like cane. Leah stood and stepped toward the river's edge. The water glowed faintly in the moonlight, a pale shimmer that rippled when she moved. For a moment, she saw movement, a figure standing waist-deep in the current, still as a reflection. The outline was soft, almost human. Leah's throat tightened. "Lila?" she whispered. The figure didn't move. It stayed there, patient, quiet, a shape made of light and memory. Leah took a step closer, and the river stirred, swallowing the image in 100 silver ripples. When she turned, Elias was watching her. "You saw her, didn't you?" Leah hesitated, then nodded. "Or maybe I just needed to." Elias didn't look surprised. "Doesn't matter which." "Either way, she heard you." Leah sank to the ground, her face buried in her hands. The fog swirled around them, cool and damp, like breath on skin. "She was always the one who believed," she murmured. "I just followed." Elias's voice came softly through the mist. "Then keep following. Just make sure this time she's leading you somewhere worth going." The swamp thickened the further they went. By dawn the fog was gone, but the air had turned to heat, heavy, wet, breathing against the skin. Elias guided the flatboat through the cypress maze, every push of the pole slow and careful. The world felt smaller here, the trees so close together that sunlight only came in thin, trembling lines. Leah kept her eyes on the water. It was still, dark and endless. Every so often she thought she saw something moving beneath it, a flash of pale reflection that vanished when she blinked. She told herself it was light, nothing more. "You quiet," Elias said after a while. "You thinking about her again?" Leah didn't answer. She just nodded once. Elias didn't press. "Sometimes the river makes you remember. Sometimes it makes you forget. Depends on what kind of soul you got." Leah glanced at him. "And which kind do you think I am?" He smiled faintly. "You still breathing. That means you ain't decided yet." They drifted until afternoon. At one bend, the trees opened into a broad clearing where the bayou widened. A stand of magnolia trees lined the far bank, their blossoms pale and open, their scent thick in the heat. Leah felt her chest tighten. "Magnolias," she whispered. "Just like—" Elias looked at her. "Like what?" She swallowed hard. "Like home." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. They pulled the boat ashore and rested under the trees. The air was sweet, but it carried something bitter underneath. Memory, maybe. Leah lay back against the trunk, her body trembling with exhaustion. The hum of cicadas filled the air like static. "Elias," she said quietly, "you ever think some places keep what happens to them? Like they don't let it go?" He nodded slowly. "I seen it. Land remembers. So does water." Leah looked toward the river, where the current moved slow and lazy. Then maybe she's part of it now. Maybe she ain't gone. Elias followed her gaze. If she is, she watching you walk away. That's how the ones who loved us stay. Leah closed her eyes. The magnolia scent was too strong. It made her stomach ache. She thought of Lila's hair, how it smelled the same when they lay in the grass as children. For the first time since the fire, she let herself cry without hiding it. The tears came slow, quiet, steady. When she opened her eyes again, a petal had fallen into her lap. White, perfect, untouched by mud. She turned it over in her hand, watching the way it glowed against her skin. Elias watched her, but said nothing. Leah finally whispered, "Then maybe she's not watching me leave. Maybe she's showing me the way. The road north was less a road and more a wound, a narrow path carved by other desperate feet before hers." Leah and Elias walked for 2 days through swamp and forest, stopping only to drink from shallow creeks and rest when the sun dropped behind the trees. The air grew cooler the further they went, the ground firmer, the smell of salt giving way to pine. On the 3rd morning, they reached dry land, real land, where farms dotted the horizon and fences cut the earth into tidy squares. The world looked cleaner here, almost gentle, but it felt like a lie. Leah kept her head down as they passed a small settlement. No one looked too close. No one ever did when a woman kept her eyes on the ground. By midday, Elias led her to a weathered barn just beyond the tree line. "We'll stop here," he said. "There's a man I know, preacher turned quiet, keeps to himself, helps those who need forgetting." Leah leaned against the doorway, dizzy from hunger. "You think I can be forgotten?" Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Not by the ones who loved you." "But the world?" "The world forgets easy." Inside, the barn was empty, except for a few bales of hay and the smell of old smoke. Leah sat on one of them, her body trembling from exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, she felt the faint, impossible tug of safety, and it frightened her more than anything. Elias stood at the door, scanning the horizon. "When night falls, you'll go to the preacher's place. He'll know what to do. I can't go further. They still look for men like me." Leah nodded, too tired to argue. "You've done enough." He smiled faintly. "Ain't about doing enough. It's about doing what's right while you can still stand." When he left, the quiet pressed close. Leah lay back on the hay, staring at the slats of light that cut across the rafters. Dust floated in the beams like tiny, lazy stars. She tried to count them, but her eyes blurred. Sleep came slow and restless. She dreamed of water again, the river, the burning house reflected in it, her sister standing just beyond the light. Lila didn't look sad this time, just tired. In the dream, she said something Leah couldn't hear, then turned toward the trees, vanishing into the dark. Leah woke with tears on her face and the faint sound of humming in her ears. That same old tune, soft and distant. She looked around the barn, her heart racing. No one was there. But when she stood, she noticed a single white magnolia petal lying on the ground beside her boot, pale even in the shadow. She knelt, picked it up, and held it against her chest. Then she whispered, "I'm still following." Night came early, the kind that swallowed color from the air until everything turned the same shade of grey. Leah left the barn as Elias had told her, walking through the narrow path that wound between the trees. The moon hung low and swollen, lighting the way in broken pieces through the branches. She reached the small house just before full dark. It was built from rough timber, no bigger than the cabin Ruth had kept, with a small cross nailed to the door and a lantern glowing faintly in the window. The light flickered like it was breathing. Leah hesitated at the step. For the first time in her life, she didn't know whether to knock or run. A man's voice called from inside, steady and soft. "You can come in. Door's not locked." She pushed it open. The man inside was older than she expected, grey-bearded, his face lined deep from sun and worry. He was sitting by a wood stove, reading from a book that looked too worn to still have words. When he looked up, his eyes weren't sharp or suspicious, just tired. "You're the one Elias sent," he said. "Name's Reverend Carr." Leah nodded, her voice barely audible. He said you help people disappear. Carr closed his book. I help them find names that ain't chained to what came before. He motioned toward the chair across from him. Leah sat slowly, her body aching. The warmth of the stove made her dizzy. Carr studied her for a moment. You lost someone. Leah stared into the fire. I lost half of me. He nodded, not asking for more. Grief don't vanish, he said quietly. It just learns to live in quieter rooms. Leah clenched her hands in her lap. She died because of him. Because I couldn't save her. Carr leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. And yet you're still here. That means something. Maybe it means she left her life inside you so at least one of you could walk out. Leah blinked, tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to live with that. You already are, he said simply. Every step away from where you came from is proof. They sat in silence for a while. The fire popped, throwing soft light across the walls. Leah glanced at the cross on the door, its shadow trembling in the heat. Can I stay here tonight? She asked. Carr nodded. There's a cot in the back. Rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about where you go next. Leah rose and walked toward the small back room. The cot was plain, the blanket thin, but she lay down without hesitation. Through the thin wall she could hear Carr humming softly, a hymn she didn't know. She closed her eyes, clutching the magnolia petal still in her hand. It was warm now from her skin. And for the first time since Lila's death, Leah dreamed of her sister not burning, not calling, but walking. Ahead of her, barefoot in the sunlight. Leah woke to birdsong. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The smell of wood smoke and the faint hum of morning made it feel almost like childhood again, back before the field, before the house, before the names that weren't hers. Reverend Carr was outside chopping wood when she stepped from the small back room. The sky above was pale and endless, washed clean by the night. He looked up as she came out. You sleep? Leah nodded. Didn't think I would. Sleep's the first mercy, he said, setting down the axe. Second one's hunger. Means the body still believes there's something worth living for. He offered her bread and dried apples from a tin. She ate slowly, watching the light crawl across the dirt yard. What happens now? She asked. Carr leaned against the fence. That depends. Some stay a while, help with the work. Others keep going north, cross into free land. I can give you a name, papers if you need 'em. The kind that make the world ask fewer questions. Leah hesitated. A new name, he nodded. Something yours this time. You choose it. The words sank deep. A name that wasn't bought, shouted or shared. A name that didn't belong to a master. She looked down at her hands, rough, scarred, still trembling. I wouldn't know what to call myself. Carr smiled faintly. Then keep the one your sister used for you. The one said with love. That's the truest kind. Leah looked away, her throat tightening. She used to call me little sister, she said, even though I was born first. Then maybe that's who you are, Carr said. A start that comes after something ends. Leah stayed silent for a long moment, staring toward the tree line. The magnolia petal was still in her pocket, soft and fragile now. She rubbed it between her fingers until it nearly crumbled. I used to think freedom meant forgetting, she said finally, but I don't want to forget her. Carr nodded. Then don't. Memory's the proof you survived. The world tried to take both of you, and it failed. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of magnolia from somewhere unseen. Leah closed her eyes. For an instant, she could almost feel Lila beside her, the warmth, the breath, the quiet hum of the song they used to share. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't crying. The ache was still there, but it no longer hollowed her. It filled her instead, like something she could finally live with. I'll help with the work, she said, for a little while. Carr smiled. Then you'll fit right in. The Lord favors those who keep their hands busy. Leah nodded. Her gaze drifted north, where the light was breaking through the trees. and though the path ahead was unknown, she took her first step toward it without fear, carrying 2 shadows instead of 1. The days at Reverend Carr's place passed quietly, marked by the rhythm of work and small mercies. Leah mended fences, hauled water, and helped with the garden behind the house. Her hands found their purpose again, rough, steady, useful. She didn't speak much, but she listened. To the creak of wood, the song of birds, the hum of the earth that didn't demand or punish. At dusk, Carr would sit by the fire and read from his worn Bible, his voice low and slow, the words curling like smoke. Sometimes Leah would hum while she worked near him. She never sang the words. She didn't know them anymore, but the sound filled the room with something softer than silence. Carr never interrupted. He just listened, head bowed, eyes closed. One evening, as they sat by the hearth, he said, "You know, when the war comes, things might change for good." Leah frowned. "What war?" He stared into the fire. "The one that's been coming for longer than we've been alive. Folks are restless, landowners angry, the world's shifting, even if it don't look like it yet." Leah thought of Magnolia Hurst, the cane fields, the house that burned. "Maybe it needs to shift," she said. "Maybe it needs to burn again." Carr smiled faintly. "Maybe so. But not everything that burns is lost, and not everything that lives is free." Leah nodded, understanding more than she wanted to. When he retired for the night, she stayed by the fire, staring at the glowing embers. Her mind drifted to her sister, how they used to sit just like this, back to back, their hair tangled, their hands clasped when the dark grew too loud. She reached into her pocket and felt the crumbling remains of the magnolia petal. It had turned to powder, soft and weightless. She let it fall into the flames. The fire hissed once and then went still. The next morning, Carr told her he'd found someone heading north, a woman and her 2 sons, traveling in a wagon under a trader's name. "They can take you as far as Tennessee," he said. "After that, you'll be on your own again." Leah didn't answer right away. She looked around the cabin, the small space that had given her quiet when she needed it most. "I thought I'd never stop running," she said softly. "Now I don't know if I can start again." Carr placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll move because you must, not because you're chased." "There's a difference," Leah nodded. She didn't pack much, just Ruth's shawl, a bit of bread, and a strip of cloth torn from her sister's old dress, the one she'd kept tucked beneath her pillow. Before she left, Carr said, "The world's cruel, but it's not heartless. You find the places that prove it ain't." Leah looked north, toward the road that wound through the woods like a ribbon of ash. "Maybe she's already found one," she said. "Maybe she's leading me there." Then she walked on, her steps steady, the morning sun warm against her face. The wagon rolled slow through the back roads, its wheels creaking like tired bones. Leah sat in the back with the woman's 2 sons, small, wide-eyed boys who didn't yet understand why their mother flinched at every sound. They rode through pine forest and red clay, through land that looked both alive and haunted. The woman's name was Clara. She spoke little, her hands always busy with the reins or with the cross she wore around her neck. Sometimes she'd glance back at Leah, her gaze sharp but kind. "You ain't got to hide your eyes, child," she said once. "The worst men ever did to us is make us afraid to look up." Leah had no answer. She just lifted her chin slowly and watched the trees pass. At night, they camped by the road. The boys would sleep near the fire, and Clara would hum, a sound not unlike the one Leah used to hear from her sister. One night, Clara asked softly, "You lost someone, didn't you?" Leah hesitated, then nodded. "My sister. We was the same, but different too." Clara smiled sadly. "That kind of loss never leaves, but you keep walking, and one day the pain don't bite so hard. It just sits with you." Leah looked into the flames. "I don't want to forget her." "Then don't," Clara said. "Just remember her kindly." The next morning, they crossed a narrow bridge over a river thick with fog. Leah leaned out, watching the water move slow beneath them. The current caught the light in pale streaks, white and trembling. For one moment, she thought she saw a figure moving through it, a woman, barefoot, hair floating behind her, eyes calm. Her sister. She blinked hard, but the vision stayed until the wagon reached the far bank. Then it was gone, leaving only the reflection of the clouds. By the time they reached Tennessee, Leah had changed her name. She told Clara to call her Anne, after her mother's mother, a woman she'd never met but always heard stories about. A woman who'd survived worse and still sang in the fields. When they parted, Clara pressed something into her hand, a small piece of carved wood, shaped like a magnolia flower. "For luck," she said. Leah smiled faintly. "For memory," she replied. They went their separate ways at dawn. Clara's wagon disappeared down one road. Leah walked down another, her feet light but sure. The forest ahead was thick and gold with autumn. She could smell rain in the air, sweet and clean. At the edge of the trees, she stopped and turned once more toward the river. The morning light caught the water, and for a heartbeat, she heard it. The faint hum she'd known all her life, the one her sister used to sing. Leah closed her eyes and whispered, "I hear you." Then she stepped forward, disappearing into the sunlit path, and the hum followed her like breath. Some stories don't end with justice or revenge. They end with the sound of footsteps, fading into a world that finally lets someone keep breathing. Leah's name was changed, her face forgotten, her past swallowed by rivers and roads. But stories have a way of clinging to what history tries to bury. They say travelers who pass through the swamps of Louisiana can still hear humming in the fog, two voices, soft and low, braided together like roots underwater. Maybe they're just echoes of grief that never found peace. Or maybe, somewhere far from Magnoliahurst, two sisters finally did. Because not all hauntings are curses. Some are reminders. That love, even broken and bloodied, can outlive the hands that tried to destroy it. If this story unsettled you, stay. There are more tales like this one, buried beneath time, waiting for the dark to remember them. Subscribe to the Macabre Record, where every whisper from the past finds its voice again.